Star Wars morality is unfairly viewed as simple good and evil. The Jedi, wearing bright coloured robes with blue and green swords, are good. The Sith, wearing black robes with red swords, are bad. And in a very broad sense, that's true. Good guy, bad guy. However, the much more interesting Star Wars stories are the ones that question this universal standard. Ahsoka's disillusion with the Jedi, Anakin Skywalker's turn to the dark side, or stories like The Mandalorian where characters are not good or evil but explore the grey area between. No character embodies the grey area of Star Wars better than Asajj Ventress. After all, she's literally grey! It's perfect! Ventress is one of my all-time favourite Star Wars characters. There's 3 reactions I expect to that statement. Who? I've only watched the movies, I'm sorry. Her? Really? Oh, of course. Me too. All of these reactions are based on how much you know about this character and how much Clone Wars you've watched, which should be all of it, because it's great and it's the top tier of Star Wars. Fight me. But for those who prefer to ignore me, let me explain. Asajj Ventress is the personal assassin of Count Dooku, officially anyway. She's actually his Sith apprentice, feeding the Ouroboros that is the Sith. Master trains student, student trains student, students kill master. That's the idea anyway. Dooku never quite managed it. This is the state of things when we first meet her anyway. About halfway through Season 3, Ventress is betrayed by Count Dooku and returns to her home planet, Dathomir. The Night Sisters take her in and she starts planning her revenge on Dooku. This results in 2 failed assassination attempts and eventually the death of her entire village. Following this, she becomes a bounty hunter, doing a job with a young Boba Fett before deciding to strike out on her own. And that's when most people probably saw her last. Ventress's story could be neatly split into 3 distinct phases: Assassin, Night Sister, Bounty Hunter. A long and arduous story of redemption. In Star Wars, redemption usually means death. Darth Vader has seen the error of his ways and sacrifices himself to save his son. Ben Solo's morality is awoken by his mum's force powers and he sacrifices himself for his smooch. Redemption equals death is a common enough trope, and it's definitely a useful one too. However, Ventress's arc tells a much more difficult story. A story of redemption where that moment of realization never comes. What happens if you have to live with your mistakes, and how do you even attempt to atone for them? And you might be thinking, Kyle, nothing in that brief description you gave sounded like redemption. Going from the assassin of an evil count to an assassin working for money is hardly worthy of redemption. And you'd be right, there is a story that brings all of these elements to close in the perfect end to her character arc. In a book! Clone Wars was cancelled before this story could be finished, which left Ventress about 3/4 of the way through her story arc. So this lady called Christy Golden decided to fix that by writing a book called Star Wars Dark Disciple. I'd pull up a copy of it right now to show as a prop, but I listened to it on Audible, so here's a picture of the cover that I will add in post. So I guess I have to take a second here to defend books. Spin-off books have a fairly iffy reputation. They're usually considered lesser than real books, but based on my experience of reading this one book and literally no other spin-off book ever, I'm going to say that's a lie. This book is great, not just as a spin-off book, but as a book in general. Any Clone Wars fan owes it to themselves to give it a read or a listen, and they should do it soon because I'm going to spoil it all before the end of this video. The book is based on 8 unreleased episodes of the Clone Wars, but it takes those ideas and puts them into a form that only really a book can accomplish. Most importantly, it's the cap to Ventress's story and is absolutely crucial to understanding her redemption arc. But before we get there, let's go through the Clone Wars.
I always had a good feeling about you, Assassin.
Early Clone Wars Ventress is a very one-note villain. There's a little bit more going on with her than, say, the 7th Sister and Rebels, but like most Star Wars villains, she's just evil and loves it. 2 character traits shine through though from early Ventress. She likes to be in control, and she's arrogant. Not exactly breaking the dark side mold there, but these qualities manifest in different ways. Not sure if you picked up on this yet, but Ventress is a woman. A trait quite rare in Star Wars bad guys, and she's definitely the most womanly of the lot. Her sexuality is actually a key aspect of her character in these early seasons, present in many aspects of her characterization. She doesn't just walk, she strides. Like a runway model, her design is intentionally provocative. Even the way she fights, she teases her opponents, in duels she flirts and even smooches. Initially this all seems like very typical femme fatale stuff, but there's way more going on here that you can only really understand with the context given by later seasons. For now, this manifests as her desire to be in control. Flirting is a way to control her opponents, to make sure she's the one leading the battle. Because really, Ventress's role in the first few seasons of Clone Wars is to provide someone to lightsaber fight every so often. If you've only watched the first few seasons of the show, then it's totally understandable that you'd see her as a fairly weak character. When I first watched it, so did I, but there's still some interesting stuff going on here, even if it is in a more traditional villainy way. Ventress serves as the direct counterpart to General Grievous, where each of them represent a different side of the Separatists. Grievous represents the war, the armies, and the public image of the Separatists, while Ventress represents the secrecy, the espionage, and most importantly, the Sith. They're actually similar characters,
my dear Obi-Wan
Kenobi.
But because of these two different approaches to evil, they clash in interesting ways, shown in their interactions on Kamino.
Your skills are impressive. Perhaps a match for my own assassin.
Count Dooku may have taught you how to swing a lightsaber, General, but that hardly makes you my equal.
And yet, I am the general in charge of this assault.
Both of them are apprentices of Dooku, but each one views the other as a pawn under their own and their master's control.
Keep playing with your droids. I'll handle breaking into the DNA room.
Shall I provide you with a droid escort?
My dear General, there's nothing you have that I could want.
When in reality, both of them are pawns. They're pawns of Dooku, who himself is a pawn of Sidious, because oops, the entire war is just a game of chess Sheev here is playing against himself. The last detail of this Ventress is her relationship with Count Dooku, a key aspect of her entire story. Like most Darkseid masters, he's a real asshole to her, punishing failure and rarely rewarding success. But in a very twisted logic kind of way, this is actually because he likes her, not in a romantic way, but in an almost parental kind of way. The dark side is about using hatred and fear as a power source, the opposite of the light side, which draws from inner peace. It's shown again with Savage, and again with Dooku doesn't torture his apprentices for fun. He does it because, according to dark side logic, fear and hatred make you more powerful.
Your anger is your strength. I hate you. Good.
So in his own twisted way, this is him making his apprentices stronger. To get back to it, when Dooku betrays Ventress, he tells her,
You have failed me for the last time.
but that's actually a lie. He didn't have any intention of betraying Ventress, he was ordered to by Darth Sidious, who correctly identified her as more than an assassin. Dooku genuinely attempts to plead for her life.
Eliminate her.
She's my most trusted. I said, eliminate her.
But he's ultimately a pawn of Sidious and has to do as he says. The fact that he doesn't and never does tell her that is interesting. He directs all of her hate towards him and away from Sidious. One explanation for this is loyalty, of course. He's not about to incriminate his boss, but I think there's way more going on here. By placing the blame on himself, he ensures that she'll only be coming after him. After all, if she tried to destroy Sidious, she'd get decimated. But if she goes after him, well, then he can control the situation. And let's get into that situation, shall we?
Take me to Dathomir.
Now, why would anyone want to go there? Ain't nothing there but fog and witches.
Exactly.
After surviving Dooku's betrayal, Ventress goes to the Night Sisters, technically her home, but a place she's never really been. This is when we get some snippets of her past, and when we get what we call in the business a recontextualization. But first let me explain the Night Sisters and how they fit into Star Wars. People usually call Star Wars science fiction, but that's not really accurate. It's got spaceships and laser guns, but none of it is really based in science. It's not like Star Trek. Star Wars is much closer to fantasy than sci-fi. The Force is essentially a soft magic system, And most importantly, Star Wars is set in the past, not the future. So when I say that the Night Sisters are a coven of witches, that's not quite as out of place as it first sounds. The Night Sisters are one of Clone Wars' many interesting additions to the Star Wars universe. Their visual design and culture, to be sure, but also their relationship to the Force. Apparently people don't like it when you add new Force abilities, which is quite frankly ridiculous. Here's all the things that have been established as Force abilities before the Night Sisters were introduced. Pushing and pulling things, jumping real high, running real fast, choking, vague and often misleading visions of the future.
He could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
Picking up an item and feeling its history, sensing disturbances, mind control, except on Toydarians.
I'm a Toydarian! Mind trick's gonna work, gonna make only money!
Perfectly aiming torpedoes, apple slicing, becoming a ghost, and shooting lightning. The Force is one of the softest magic systems in all of fiction. It's like Superman, it can do literally anything the plot needs it to do. And that's fine, it really is. If you want to go full fantasy, imagine the Force as a giant pool of mana that people can learn to tap into in different ways. The Jedi do this in a very spiritual way, and the Sith do it in a very literal way, but they both use the Force in similar ways, which is why the Night Sisters are a great addition to the universe. They use this magical energy in a completely different way, in a way much closer to our normal imagination of magic. I think it's so different that some people don't get that it's still the Force. But I love this because it totally changes our understanding of the Force. Up until this point, our only reference for the Force has been the Jedi and the Sith. Very directly light side and dark side, and for the rest of the people in the galaxy, the Force isn't really that important. But the Force is a fundamental part of this universe, and the Night Sisters are the first group we see that shows us that other cultures might have completely different understandings of the Force and how to use it. It's something Clone Wars dabbles in again with races like the Bardotans late in Clone Wars, or the Zeffo in Jedi Fallen Order. There was a not-so-subtle comparison drawn between using the Force and drug addiction.
You wanna buy some death sticks?
Dark Disciple uses his bookness to really explore this, which we'll get into. But for now, think of it like this. In small doses, the Force does nothing to you. That's why the Jedi practice restraint, meditation, and emotional distance.
You don't want to sell me death sticks.
This is technically how you get more powerful with light side, in a very literal sense. But the light side isn't really about power. The dark side is all about power. Power that is accessed through strong emotion. So getting really angry, letting the hate flow through you, as it were, is like a shot of heroin straight into the arteries. It's pure Force, dude, and it's addictive. It's why people are described as falling to the dark side. It's because they get addicted to the power it gives you. This is explicitly how Sith Masters draw in and manipulate new apprentices. I know it sounds silly to make this comparison, but I'm not reading too much into it. It's all right there, trust me, I'm not crazy! I know it seems like I've gone completely off topic, but understanding this about the Force is key to understanding Ventress's redemption arc, and we're getting there, I promise. Ventress comes to the Night Sisters who heal her, specifically Mother Talzin heals her, the leader of the Night Sisters, and a very complicated character in her own right. While they're healing her, we get flashes of Ventress's past and immediately get a lot of context for who and how she is. As a baby, she was given to a slaver as part of some kind of deal to protect the clan. Her master was killed, but a Jedi found her. He took her in as a Padawan, but then he was also killed by pirates. She killed them all in revenge and was found by Count Dooku, who took her in as his apprentice. Essentially, her life before us meeting her was tragedy after tragedy, being passed from one master to another. Not all of these masters were bad. In fact, both this flashback and Dark Disciple describe her slave master as being surprisingly kind. But it still leaves her in a position where there's always been someone telling her what to do. She was raised as a slave. Her master may have been kind, but he was still a master. She was taken in by a Jedi. He may have been nice, and Ventress even remembers him fondly, but he took her in and trained her to spend her entire childhood fighting pirates. It's not exactly shocking that she killed them all for revenge. She didn't know anything else. It's no surprise that Dooku was able to bring her under his wing either. Ventress is dealing with some serious codependency issues, and I'm not making that up. A big part of her arc is just gaining a drive to do things on her own without someone telling her what to do or how to do it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You see, you might expect this to be when her redemption arc starts. Betrayed by her master, returning home, beginning to see the error of her ways. But it isn't that simple. She didn't go to Dathomir to be healed. She went there to help get her revenge.
I will have revenge. Yes, you shall, sister. We will see to it.
This experience didn't actually change Ventress at all. It just gave her a new goal: kill Count Dooku. It's not a good plan, but she has absolutely nothing else in her life to work towards, so it's something. Talzin provides her with many tools to mount an assassination. 2 of her strongest warriors, a cloak of invisibility, a dart to numb the senses, and 3 Jedi lightsabers to make it look like it was the Jedi should they be caught. Keeping all of that last part. Naturally, this mission fails, and when they return, it's time for another plan. Now that Dooku is scared, he'll want a replacement for Ventress, and Talzin will provide one, a sleeper agent for Ventress to use. She sets off to find one, and through a series of trials picks this guy, Savage Opress. Yes, really, that's his name. Look, don't pretend Star Wars is subtle, okay? Maul, Sidious, Tyrannus, Taron Malicos, come on. Savage is turned into a Spartan by the Night Sisters and then sent off to Dooku, who trains him in the dark side as planned. Anakin and Obi-Wan come asking about the giant tank who obliterated 2 Jedi, and she tells them where to find them. Realising that their plan is in danger, she sends Ventress early to try again at killing Dooku, which fails again. This time, because she wasn't quite as in control of Savage as she thought, and she runs, not to be seen again for some time. Savage returns to Dathomir while Talzin sends him to find his brother. Later, when Ventress returns, it's to renounce her past and become a Night Sister, but unfortunately for her, Dooku knew she returned and sent in the troops to, well, the clue's in the name for this one. And then they all die, on screen, in this kids' TV program that aired on Cartoon Network. Let's examine all this. What makes this part of the story so interesting to me is that it forgoes the easy route. Ventress, betrayed and abandoned by her master, could have surrendered to Obi-Wan and Anakin right here, joined the Jedi and helped them beat Dooku, but she doesn't do that. Despite not really having a reason, she fights them anyway. They don't have Ventress go through that click moment, the "are we the baddies" moment. She stays true to her character and continues to be fueled by hate and bitterness, just aimed in a different direction. She goes to the Night Sisters for help, the closest thing she has to family, but even there, everything is not what it seems. The show doesn't make this as clear as I like, but Mother Talzin is yet another master manipulating and using Ventress. I didn't understand this until doing research for the video, but while Mother is her title, she's actually the biological mother of Savage and Maul, and that is key to understanding why she's so on board with Ventress's revenge plan. Talzin wants revenge on Sidious for kidnapping her son, and she wants to start by thwarting his plans for the Clone Wars by killing Dooku. That's why she had Ventress pose as a Jedi, because she knew that Ventress would fail. She knew that she could get her son involved, and she thought she knew that Savage would be able to kill Dooku. Turns out she was wrong about that one. After 2 failed attempts, Ventress realises that she isn't good enough to kill Dooku and so gives up. She decides instead to join the Night Sisters and start a new life. It's only here, after a long absence on her own, that we start to see a change in Ventress. She's still searching for someone to lean on, her codependency this time landing on Talzin and the Night Sisters. But she's starting to let go of the hatred that's been driving her up to this point.
I've been hiding, reevaluating. I suspected as much.
I'm kind of fascinated by depictions of revenge. Revenge is a very common topic in all forms of media, and the way it's depicted can tell you a lot about the message of a piece. If revenge is depicted as successful, justified, and necessary, then the message is clear. The message is implicitly telling you that revenge is good, and by extension, you should be okay with revenge. In Star Wars, revenge is never successful. It gets pretty close sometimes, but ultimately the person seeking vengeance is defeated. Ventress's quest for revenge is depicted as selfish and short-sighted. Because of her actions, her village is killed. Savage is released on the galaxy, which eventually leads to the return of Maul and all the strife that brings with it. The death of her new home is tragic and devastating, to be sure, but ultimately it's this event that triggers the greatest change in Ventress. It's a harsh and necessary lesson that her actions have real consequences, and it's a lesson she needs to learn on her own. With her last master gone, she's left to figure out who she is, by herself, for the first time in her life.
No! Wait! You can't leave me here!
We rejoin Ventress sometime after the massacre. She's got a new outfit, but absolutely no plan. So she goes to old Mos Eisley to get drunk at the cantina, where she stabs a guy for making advances on her. He kind of had it coming.
Hey there. What's a pretty bald babe like you doing in a desert like this?
Get lost.
Hey, I'm talking to you, lady.
Because of this, she gets roped into taking his place on a team of bounty hunters led by an ickle baby Boba Fett.
My name's Boba.
Figuring she has nothing better to do, she joins up. Their mission? Defend a train from Mortal Kombat copyright infringement. As it turns out, the cargo they're protecting is a lady, this guy's sister to be exact, being shipped away and married to the planet's lord. Seeing herself in this girl, Ventress has a realization here. She tricks the lord and saves the kidnapped girl, albeit not for free, and she gives Boba and his crew their cut before deciding to go off on her own.
I'm not part of any team.
You're too good for us now. Is that it?
No. Once I was just like you. But I'm not that person anymore. Now, I have a future.
Bounty hunting in Star Wars is in an interesting place morally.
That bounty hunting is a complicated profession.
What he said. Unlike a cowboy story where bounties are placed by a local sheriff, in Star Wars bounties are usually placed by crime lords like Jabba the Hutt. They aren't always, and episodes where bounty hunters defend farmers prove that, but it's certainly a morally neutral job at best. That's a lot better than Sith Assassin though, and it's a much healthier career for Ventress. The whole episode plays as something of a realization for her. She's good at this. She enjoys fighting and she can be doing something at least kind of productive with her life, and so she sets off to do it, but by herself this time, finally free of anyone telling her what to do, but certainly not free of her past. I feel like when you try to explain that the cartoon show brought back Darth Maul with spider legs, you sound like an idiot, unavoidably. Yeah man, they brought him back with spider legs and it was awesome. They completely revamped the character. He's one of the best villains in Star Wars. And then they just look at you and go, Darth Maul? This Darth Maul? The guy who said nothing and then got cut in half? He's one of the best villains in all of Star Wars? But like, it's true though. They did bring him back. It was in fact awesome. I can't go into it right now. This isn't a video about Darth Maul, but just know, it happened. It's a thing. Remember Savage? He did it. So Maul's back and he lures Obi-Wan out to this village to kill him. At the same time, Ventress accepts a bounty on Savage, figuring that only she may be able to help stop the monster she's unleashed. Instead, it turns into an Obi-Wan rescue mission. Just like every single episode with Maul, this episode slaps, but I'm focusing on the Ventress part of it. There's a very intentional focus put onto the way Ventress enters this fight. We see her hide, wait for the right moment, and then straight out with the utmost confidence, even including an evil laugh for flavour.
Who is this, brother?
A Dathomir witch.
It's a deliberate callback to the way she normally enters fights, only this time to feint, so she can trick the two brothers away and help Obi-Wan. This shows us that she's already much less driven by anger than she used to be. She actually understands now that she isn't capable of taking on two people at once, and so she uses a trick to free Obi-Wan. Their banter is great in this episode as well, by the way.
A brother? Looks like he's half the man you are, Savage.
Anything more to say?
I like your new legs. They make you look taller. When did you become the good guy?
Don't insult me. I want that back.
That's fine. Red's not my color.
The way she fights is different too. She's still very acrobatic, but her style has become much more controlled and defensive and a lot less savage screaming. The two of them are unable to defeat both Maul and Savage and escape, but I think this episode does a great job of showing how different she's become, to the point that even Yoda puts trust in her to help. Yet she still feels like the same person. She's just learned her lessons and is living by them. It makes her character arc one of the most compelling and rewarding to watch unfold. Ventress makes one last appearance in the show's original finale. Ahsoka has been framed for murder and is on the run with a bounty on her head. You can see where this is going. Ventress catches her and intends on turning her over, but Ahsoka manages to convince her to help instead. How, you may ask? Well,
we're not so different, you and I.
No, I'm serious.
I know Dooku tried to have you killed. I know he betrayed you. What if this is his new apprentice? I've fallen from my path just as you've fallen from yours. We have a lot more in common than you think.
The choice to have these two characters meet up at this point in their respective arcs is quite a stroke of genius. Ventress, who spent her life serving the Sith, has finally let go and become her own woman. Ahsoka is about to go down that exact same journey with her departure and disillusionment with the Jedi. They have opposite journeys, but their destination is the same. Ventress is a little bit further down that path, but not that much further. In this episode, she even agrees to avoid killing the clone troopers.
See? Didn't kill one. It's the new me.
There's one more interesting parallel here too. When Ahsoka is caught, and assuming Ventress betrayed her, Anakin Skywalker comes to question her, and it becomes immediately clear that at this point, he's actually more evil than she is.
Tell me what happened!
Unlike Ahsoka, who has a parallel arc, Anakin is well on his way to a downward spiral, and moments like this sprinkled through Clone Wars really reinforce that, but this one especially works given that he's already out darksiding Ventress, a former Sith apprentice. This is the last time we see Ventress in Clone Wars. And as a conclusion to her arc, well, it isn't one, is it? This was just a stop-off to the actual conclusion to her story that was supposed to come in a staggering 8-episode story arc, which would make it the largest story arc in the whole show, and I believe it given the book, which I'm about to get into, but first I want to wrap up some thoughts on the Clone Wars. As a visual medium, the show does a great job of showing the change in Ventress visually as well as just in the story, which was an especially hard challenge for them since Ventress was, well, designed to look evil. The pale white skin, the bald, tattooed head, the sharp features, those piercing pale blue eyes, and of course that voice.
If it isn't Skywalker's filthy, obnoxious little pet.
She looks more like an emaciated corpse than a person. Her outfit is cold, blue and white, but to contrast her sickly appearance, it's tight-fitting and sexually provocative. Now compare that to the way she looks by the end of the show. Her face has more colour to it, her eyes more blue than white, and her harsh frown lines softened. Her outfit is far more practical, with armour and a helmet, no skin showing at all, warm browns and greys, and eventually hair along with a yellow lightsaber to replace the red ones. Changes we never got to see in the show proper. It's a change that happens slowly over the course of seasons, but when you compare the start and the end, it's drastic, which is the true power of a long redemption arc like this. Not only seeing the characters change through their actions, but literally seeing them change too. I have to talk about the book now. If I haven't made myself clear already, I really do think you should read it. It's a great read, or listen. This book has twists and turns that will only be effective if you go in blind, and I'm going to spoil some things going forward in this video, so consider this your last warning. You can pause now, you go read it. I won't feel bad. Please. 3, 2, 1, bye. So, to very briefly summarise if you decided to ignore me, the plot of this book is that the Jedi plot an assassination of Count Dooku, and to do it they send this guy, Quinlan Vos, to team up with Ventress. They end up falling in love and she starts teaching him how to use the dark side of the Force. They try to assassinate Dooku, but they fail and Vos is captured. Not just captured though, captured and broken, turned to the dark side. Ventress finds this out when she mounts a rescue mission and he attacks her, leaving her in despair. The Jedi reach out to her to help bring Vos back and they succeed, finding him actually not turned evil but being tortured. Ventress doesn't believe him and tries to attack him, but the Jedi believe he's telling the truth. Eventually she forgives him and the Jedi send him again to assassinate Dooku, only this time it's because Yoda saw darkness in his heart and they want to see what he does. Ventress tags along and it turns out she was right all along. He was still evil, working with Dooku with the intention of discovering and killing Darth Sidious. Dooku, Vos and Ventress get trapped on a planet by the Jedi and eventually Ventress sacrifices herself to save Vos, seeing in the Force that this is what he needs to bring him out of the darkness. And finally the book ends with her being returned to Dathomir and Vos living out his days attempting to honour her. You see, the title itself is a twist. Ventress isn't the Dark Disciple, Vos is. I knew 2 things going into this book that I wish I didn't. 1, Ventress dies. 2, Ventress and Vos are Ventress and Vos. I wish I didn't know the former for obvious reasons, I think, and I wish I didn't know the latter because it severely lowered my expectations of what the book was going to be. Ventress and this guy? That sounds awful. Spoilers, it's not. It may actually be one of the most effective love stories in all of Star Wars. I can't get into it because I just don't have the time, but just take my word on it, okay? What this book really excels at is playing with your trust. Trust is a big theme of the book. Trust in yourself, trust in others, trust in organisations and figures of authority. Once they rescue Voss from Dooku, you can never be sure if you can trust him or not, and I think that effect only works if you go in blind, at least I assume so. I don't want to turn this into a book review, so let's get back on topic. There is a reading of this book that's a bit iffy. She needs a man to set her straight, but I think that reading ignores the actual content of the story. The core of the relationship is not him setting her straight. If anything, the opposite happens. Their relationship is ultimately what leads Voss to the dark side. But on a personal level, it's the final stage of her recovery from a life of trauma. Finally opening up to someone, being able to trust again, working alongside someone instead of using them or being used by them. That trust is ultimately used against her, which is what makes it such a tragic story. But it's still the final step in her personal journey, and she even starts to ask people for help. On her initial rescue mission, she recruits Boba Fett's team, and hilariously they're able to capture Count Dooku while she finds Voss, albeit only temporarily. The book serves as Ventress's final temptation to the dark side. She had given up on her revenge attempts long ago, but along came one more opportunity to try again, and with it, the anger and the fear. She believes that the only way to defeat Dooku is the dark side, and so she convinces herself that she and Voss will be able to use it without being controlled by it, which leads to the darkest scene in the book, Voss's trial against the Sleeper, where she forces him to kill an innocent creature. It's a point that crosses the line, very intentionally. Remember, the dark side is drugs. This scene is Voss's first hit, and it's very apparent right here that he wasn't ready for it.
The Sleeper's head snapped back. Puzzlement flowed through it. Then cold, primal, simple fear. So pure, so strong, so liberating.
Her push to make him stronger turned him into a monster. The primary advantage of a book is that we can hear the thoughts of the characters involved, and it becomes increasingly clear on this final assassination attempt that Ventress isn't as invested as she should be. She still hates Dooku, but with Voss she thinks she's found a new purpose. She'd rather run away and be happy, but she pushes on anyway, because she feels honour-bound to do so. Voss's capture and turn to the dark side serves as the end of Ventress's use of it. After this point in the book, she never uses it again, as she fully understands the harm it causes others, because now she's on the other side of it. This is the point where she goes from chaotic neutral to chaotic good. There's a really powerful moment that can only really be understood in the audio version. As Ventress fights through the hallways to rescue Voss, this music starts to play.
Ventress dropped directly on top of one, ripped off its head, and flung it at one of its companions. Deftly, she executed a handspring and came up kicking out with both feet, using the force to empower the strike.
Hero music. It's a subtle but incredibly effective way of showing her change. For the first time in her life, she's doing something completely selfless. It also serves as an important change in the book. For the first half of the book, we follow Voss. We see inside both characters' heads, but the camera, as it were, stays with Voss when they're apart. After this point, the camera sticks with Ventress instead, and we actually stop hearing his thoughts. There's an incredibly interesting dynamic between Ventress and the Jedi. For obvious reasons, they don't trust her, but at this point, she actually has the moral high ground over them. They feign outrage over her past as an assassin, while they themselves sent one of their own on an assassination mission, and this dynamic is especially explored with Obi-Wan, who in a very real way, sort of trusts Ventress more than he does the rest of the Council. He also has one of the best lines in the book.
You weren't there. You didn't see his face. You don't know how hard it is to come back from.
You did it, Kenobi interrupted quietly. Ventress paused in mid-sentence, her eyes looking piercingly into his. He could sense how stunned she was by his recognition of what she had done. Some of the heat had gone from her voice as she replied,
"Just barely."
"But still," Kenobi pressed, "you understand what it takes. There may be a chance for him yet."
The rest of the Council don't recognise her change, but Obi-Wan, the moral centre of the Jedi, does, and it's a really powerful moment of recognition. This story doesn't have a cheery ending, but it does have one that perfectly ends her arc by eliminating her most consistent trait of the entire series: running away.
You want to run?
I learned from watching you.
Funny.
During the final few chapters, it's clear that she has many, many opportunities to run, opportunities that the old Ventress would have taken, but that's not who she is anymore, and so she sticks with Voss, waiting for an opportunity to break the dark side's hold on him, not even remotely caring that she has a chance to kill Dooku. Eventually that moment comes. Reaching out with the light side instead of the dark, she sees a glimpse of the future, and understands that the way to save Voss from himself is with her life, so she moves in front of Dooku's attack, and dies in his arms. It's a different kind of sacrifice from that of Darth Vader, where the act of sacrifice was his redemption. Ventress was already there. Through a long and tragic story, she had redeemed herself. It wasn't a sacrifice to redeem herself, it was a sacrifice to redeem Voss. It was time for him to learn that his actions had consequences, though what he had done had hurt the people he cared about. There's an underlying tragedy to the Sith. People don't generally join the dark side out of malice or evil, other than Palpy. They're manipulated, controlled with lies and the draw of the dark side, but almost all of these stories end in a quick death, whether they learn their lesson or not. Asajj Ventress is one of the only characters in Star Wars who gets a true redemption arc. It's a story that could only really be told in a long-running form of media like a TV show or a book, but the effect is definitely worthwhile. It's incredibly satisfying to see a one-note villain character you're supposed to dislike transform into a character who you're actively rooting for, and they're genuinely sad to see go. It's some of the most effective storytelling in Star Wars, and I'm not being hyperbolic. It's why I think Ventress is one of the most interesting and compelling characters in all of Star Wars. Nathan, I'm talking to you directly now. Read Dark Disciple.
On the negative side of the middle, he's like a right-wing centrist, and Obi-Wan's like a left-wing centrist.
How dare you bring modern politics into a Star Wars discussion?
I'm just trying to word it.
What are you, some kind of SJW?
I'm trying to word it the best way I can to make the people who've listened to this kind of get where I'm coming from.